In this video, I'm going to show you how to install Express, Babel, Gulp, Facebook Flow on top of Node.js. Now I'm going to show you, this video, I'm going to show you how to install all these things on my system is Ubuntu, but the instructions should be the same for any version of Linux or Mac, and similar to Windows, but of course there probably are some differences with Windows. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to open up my terminal window, and I'm going to make a directory, call it project 1. Let's see into that project. So the first thing you're going to want to do is install Node. And I have a YouTube video on installing Node, and I'll link to that video in this, so you can easily install Node if you don't already have it installed. Okay, so once you have Node installed, you need to verify that you have Node installed. And so if you just type in Node version, it should give you the version of Node that you have installed. Currently, the most recent up-to-date Node version is 5.11, so this one is just a tiny bit out of date, but no big deal. Okay, so you have a project. I'm calling this thing Project 1, and there's no files in it. Okay, the first thing we want to do is, well, the first thing we want to do is probably just create the initial package.json file. So you could say touch package.json and create your package.json file that way, or you can. This is what I normally do: is just do an npm init. And what this will do is it'll ask you a series of questions, and then it will create the package.json for you. So it says, what's the name of your project? What's the version of your project? A description of it, you can put that in if you want. The entry point, you can put that in. Test command, I'm going to leave that blank. Git repo, this is the URL to your Git repo. This one doesn't currently have one, so I'm going to leave that blank. Any keywords this app may have. The author. Like that. License, what kind of license you like. And then if you like it, you can hit enter, yes, and then there will be a package.json file. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Atom. So if you don't have Atom installed, so Atom is just a text editor, and what's cool about it is that it runs on Linux or Mac or Windows. So that's pretty cool. You can just learn how to use one editor, and it will work cross-platform. It's pretty popular. It's made by the people at GitHub. So if you want to install Atom, just go to atom.io, and here it is. And you can just download. I'm using Linux, so this is a Debian file. But if you can download it for Windows or Mac or whatever. So if you want to download Atom, there it is. After you've downloaded Atom, you just say atom dot, and it will open up the directory. It'll open up all the files in the directory that you're in. So here is this package.json file. So I can click on this thing and go in here and see what's going on. And of course I can change things if I want. So what I'm going to do is this scripts thing, I'm just going to remove that for right now. I may add some more stuff to that later. And then that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to save that. So the first thing, just create a package.json file. Now the package.json file, what its purpose is it's basically like a configuration file for your Node program. So you know that an app is a Node app if it has this package.json file. So that's the first step. Now the next step I want to do is I want to create some blank files, and then just to kind of get us going. So I'm going to say touch Gulp File .babel.js, and this is going to be a Gulp file. But the reason I'm using this Babel word here in the middle is you could just do Gulp File.js, and those are like old school Gulp files. But if you want to use the new ES6, ES2015 syntax inside of your Gulp file, you have to give it that name. So this talk is all about using the latest and greatest version of ES6 and actually ES7. We're going to do a little bit of ES7 stuff. So it's about using that throughout your entire code base. So it kind of doesn't make sense to have ES6 code uh, in here and then be using ES5 for your Gulp file. So why not just make it all ES6? So that's what we're going to do here. So there's your Gulp file. You may want a README file. So I like to create a Markdown file. So when you create your Git repo in here, then you can just add whatever you want to your README file. That's always a good one to add. And then when you have a Git later on when you have a Git repo, you may want to ignore certain files. So I like to say touch.git ignore, and that will create a git ignore file. And what we'll put in here is a bunch of files that we want to ignore. So we push up to say GitHub, those files won't get pushed up. And let's add also a .flow config. And what Flow is it's called Facebook Flow, and it's basically a static type checker for your code. And so you can give you can annotate your, let's say, functions with types, and so as you're writing, it'll actually do static type analysis to make sure. Say you have a function that takes a string and you send in an integer in, it'll flag that. So it's a good. The other thing you can the other tool for if you want to add types to JavaScript is TypeScript, which is pretty cool. But I'm going to be using Flow instead. So there's that. And then the last configuration file is Babel Rc. And so this is a configuration file for Babel. And so it tells us, like what type of things do you want to transpile or convert. So that's what that is. So here's our basic setup right here. I also want to go ahead and create the code. So my code, my backend code is going to be, I'm going to put it in a directory, call it source. So I'm going to make a directory called source. There it is. All my code is actually going to go in there. And I'm going to have static content, say like an HTML file. So I'll put all my static files, things that would show up on the front end, say like Angular files or React files or Backbone or whatever, just front end stuff, front end static files. I'm gonna put those into a public directory. So there's that, and yeah, that's all I need right now. So it might be good for me to go ahead and create a Git repo. So I'm going to do that by typing in git init, and that'll create this Git repository. And then I'm going to say git add. I'm going to add all this stuff, and then I'm going to commit it. Okay, so now this thing is a Git repository, and you see how Atom actually doesn't know that this thing is a Git repo yet. So what I like to do is just close down Atom, open it back up again, and now when it opens up, you can see this is grayed out. It's grayed out because it's ignored. The Git file is ignored by Atom. Oh, and GitHub. And also you see this master thing down here. This is showing you're on your master branch on Git, so that's pretty cool. We are going to, so I guess the first thing we can do is, one of the first things we can do is edit our Git config. So I'm going to go in here. Now I want to ignore two things. One is we're gonna be downloading node modules. So I'm gonna go, and what this will do is this will make sure that the node modules won't get uploaded. The other folder I want to ignore is the app folder. So what's going to happen is we're going to write all of our code in this source folder, and this is going to be ES6 or even ES7 code, and we're going to write it in here. But the problem is that Node can't run ES6, or it can run the current version of Node is 5. It can run some things that are ES6, but it can't run all of them. So that'll blow up. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Babel to transpile or convert things that are ES6 into ES5, which Node can run all ES5 code. So there's a couple of different ways of doing this. You could like compile it inline or transpile it inline from one language to another. I shouldn't say one language, but like one version of the language to another version. You could do that. But what I like to do is just create a separate directory and then have the code transpiled from this directory into another directory, and then run it from that other directory. And that directory is going to be called app. So if I create an app directory, which I could do here, like this, you can see this file is hidden, and so it won't actually get uploaded. Now you may be wondering, well, if I'm not uploading this converted code, then how can I run on the server? Well, you'd have some sort of build script when you uploaded it to when you deployed it. It would actually, on deploy, you could have it transpile your code from this directory to this code to that directory. So my point is, don't check this into source control because it's just transpiled code. Just the code that you're going to write here, and then when you want to deploy it, you can transpile it on the server using a build script. Okay, so that's the git ignore file. All right. So let's talk a little bit about this Babel Rc file. So what this does is this is a configuration file for Babel. So when we run Babel, now it might be instructive for me to show you the Babel website. I forget the URL to it. Yeah, here it is. So what Babel is, it says right here, it's a JavaScript compiler, and it just turns one version of JavaScript, let's say ES6, into, and it's also called ES2015, into ES5 code. So it transforms it, and it does all these different things, all these different features. So if I come back here, I don't need this. If I come back here to my Babel Rc file, now you can tell it like I want arrow functions, or I want rest or spread, or generators or iterators, or the new class syntax or whatever. Like you can tell it specifically what different types of things you want to transpile, which is one way of doing it. Another way is there are presets. And so what I like to do is add those. And so let me show you how this thing works. So this basically it's basically a JSON document. So you create these squigglies right here like that, or open curlies, and then we're going to create this this key or property called presets, like that. And so what's going to happen is when Babel compiles, whatever presets we have, we'll put them in here, and I'll show you what this means. So this is basically an array, right? It's an array, and we're going to put ES2015. Now, the interesting thing about this is we don't actually want Babel to convert every possible thing ES2015 or ES6 into ES5. We don't really, into ES5. We really don't want that because Node, I'm currently running Node version 5. We really don't want that because Node can actually run a lot of ES6 code already. So the point is, why transpile everything when you only really need to transpile just a subset of ES6 code? So there's another preset out there this guy wrote, and so it's ES2015, and you can say Node 5. And what will happen is it will actually only transpile just the subset of things that you need to transpile from ES6 to ES5, but the things that Node 5 already knows about, it doesn't have to change those. So I like to use this instead of ES2015. So there's that one. And then there's another preset I want to use, and it's called stage 0. So what this is these are different. So ES2015 is already a spec, and it's already signed off, and it's in the spec is live. But there are new things coming out in ES7 that obviously it's not a spec yet. And so if you want to have things that are in ES7, there's different versions of it. There's like stage 0, 1, 2, 3. There may be other stages. But basically stage 0 is things that are they're the most likely to change. And then as you go stage 1, stage 2, etc., those are more rigorous or things that are least likely to change. So if you use stage 0, these are you could think of these as highly experimental things. For example, something that stage 0 is exponentiation. So in JavaScript, if you wanted to find the exponent, if you want to find the power of something, say 2 to the third, you'd say something like var x equals math 2 comma 3, and what that'll do is that will take 2 to the third power. Well, there's something in ES7, and I believe it's at stage 0, and that's it's the power operator, and that's in Ruby and Python, I believe. You can change this code. So this is like straight up ES5 code. You could say let x equals 2 to the 3. So this let thing, that's ES6, and then this is the power operator. That's ES7 code. So if you want to use this, for example, you have to use stage 0. And so what it'll do is it'll grab things that are basically experimental on the next version of JavaScript that haven't been applied yet. And so we're going to be using this, or you can use this. And so I like to use this. You don't have to if you're like, oh, that's too experimental. I don't want it. Then that's fine. Then don't put it in. Okay. So those are presets, and then we're also going to use Flow. And Flow, what Flow is going to do is it's going to check our code. It's going to do like static type analysis on it. Static meaning it's going to check the types basically at when I save it. Basically static means when the code is not running. Or before the code runs. So in order to do this, there's not a preset for this. Of course, we could create one, but these are just a plugin. So you say plugins, and it's an array of plugins. So this is called transform flow strip types. So what's going to happen is I'll just give you a small example down here. Let's say you want to create a function, and you'll say this function is called add, and it's going to take an x, which is an integer, and then a y, which is an integer. And then you just say return x plus y, right? Something like that. Well, so this is just normal JavaScript, but I added in these type annotations right here. But you can't leave this code in because Node will just throw errors at you because this obviously isn't valid JavaScript. So what this transform flow strip types plugin will do is it'll actually take this and basically strip out. That's why it's called strip types. It'll basically strip out these types right here, so you don't have to do that. So that's for Flow. So basically, in recap here, these presets, where it says ES15, 25 node, and stage 0, these are actually a bunch of plugins put together in one preset. So you could actually look at this as actually basically a collection of plugins, and this is a collection of plugins. So you could, this thing here could be like, whatever, 10, 15, 20 plugins. So, but instead of writing, however many plugins those are, I'd have to remember how to spell them and whatever, you can just sort of aggregate them together into presets. And so, yeah, so that's our Babel RC. The next thing I want to do is show you how to install Flow, and then we'll set up this Flow config file. So in order to install Flow, there's a couple different ways of doing it, but the best way is there's a node module. So that's since we're using Node, that's the best way or the simplest way to do it. So if you type in npm install flow-bin and -g, this will install Flow, the binary of Flow. The G means globally, so it won't get installed in your local Node modules folder. It'll get installed in the global folder. Okay. So this is installing Flow, and okay, it's finished. So once Flow is installed, you then can go to your Flow config file and edit it. So it basically has 4 sections. One is called the ignore section. There's another section called include, and then libs, and then options. So ignore, include, libs, and options. What ignore does is when Flow is running, ignore it. You put directories in here, and so if Flow is having a hard time on some files, and you don't want Flow to check some certain directories, you can put those directories in here, and it'll ignore them. If you want Flow to find some certain directories, then if you want Flow to include certain directories when it's doing its static type analysis, then you'd put them there. Libs, what this is, it's basically allows you to add metadata to Flow, so it knows. So like if you're using a type and it doesn't know like a class or whatever or a function, and like let's say you're just using it and Flow doesn't know where it came from, you can actually in here specify a file and give it basically spec out that, or give it like a definition of that type, so then it knows about it. And then here's some options. Yeah, so we've now installed Flow. We've set up Flow config, and so that's ready to go. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is let's install the node modules that we're going to use locally in this project, and then let's also edit our package.json file so it looks good. Okay, so node modules. So there's 2 types of node modules. There's one type that we're going to use in for development. So only when we're deving our code do we need these node modules. And then there's other types of node modules that will be run on the server. And so if you want your modules, well, let's just install them, and I'll show you the difference. So we're going to need some node modules that are just used for basically development or build purposes only, and those are called dev dependencies. So let's install those. So you would say npm install -- save dev. Okay, and what these will do, these are basically node modules for development purposes only. Okay, one is called the Babel CLI. This is the command line interface for Babel. It basically allows you to transpile ES6 or ES7 code into ES5 code from the command line. And then I want to install Babel plugin transform flow strip types. This is the plugin for stripping out the types in Flow, which we mentioned that before in the Babel section. And then those two presets. So Babel preset ES 2015 node 5 and Babel preset stage 0. Now we're going to be using Gulp here in a minute, so it probably is a good idea to install that Gulp node module. I'm going to install Gulp live server, what that will do is that will allow you to basically restart Express when a change is made to your code. Gulp shell is a program to run shell commands from within Gulp, like ls or pwd or whatever. Any kind of shell, any kind of program you can run from your terminal, you can run it from Gulp, which is neat. And then there's Gulp Watch, and what that's going to do is it's a Gulp utility that watches for your file system change, and when a file system change, it calls other Gulp tasks. So it's for watching your file system. And then rimraf, and this is for recursively deleting directories. So if you want to, and what we're going to do is we're gonna as we build or rebuild our code, we're going to delete certain directories and then have them rebuilt. And so this is a good way of deleting directories. And there's another one called run sequence. And what run sequence is going to do, basically when you write Gulp tasks, they will run in parallel and asynchronously. So it's kind of hard to, if you have a bunch of tasks that you want them to run deterministically, one right after the other, it can be difficult. This run sequence node module, it basically allows you to deterministically say, okay, I want to run these 2 in sequence, these 4 in parallel, and then these 3 in sequence, and then these 5 in parallel. So it's a better way of you constructing your Gulp file. Also, Gulp version 4 will actually have this basically the code for this built into Gulp 4, so you won't need that. Okay, so you hit enter, and what it's going to do is it's going to install all these. Hopefully you spelled them all correctly. It's going to install all these. It's downloading all these node modules from npmjs.org. It's installing them locally in the node modules directory. And then it's going to add these files to the package.json file. So in the future, if you need a list of these files, you can look in that package.json file for that manifest. So okay, it finished. So I can verify this by clicking on my package.json file, and you can see under dev dependencies, these are all the node modules and their versions that we're using. And under dev dependencies, meaning these are the node modules that will be used only for development, not for when the actual app is running in production. Okay, so there's that. Now I need to install some node modules that I'll probably be using when I'm running Express. So, okay, so that's npm install. And you say --save. Don't say the dev part here. Just say save. And we're going to be using Express.js. Now in Express, there's middleware in here that you can add to Express to give it more functionality, more features. One of the popular ones is body parser. That allows you to, if someone sends an HTTP request to you, it allows you to like pull apart the body or parse it. That's why it's called that. There's another one called Multer. That's in case someone sends you a file. It allows you to basically parse that file and do things with it. And then another thing is I like to have like logging. So when things are happening in Express, like requests, for example, are coming in, I'd like to log those requests out at least to the command line, to the console, so you can see those. So that's called Morgan. Yeah. So I'm going to just install these 4 node modules. Obviously, when you write your Express app, this is just going to be a very small demo app. But obviously when you're going to use it, you're going to have databases and cookies and caching and tons of other node modules. But this is going to be just a very simple one. Okay, so if I come back here, now you can see here, these are the node modules that will be used in production. These are the node modules that will be used in development. Great. Now, once my app is live, what's going to happen is I'm going to write all my code here in this source directory, but Babel is going to transpile it into this app directory. So in this app directory, I'm going to have a file called index.js. That's going to be the start or my main file. So in scripts here, what I want to do is I want to create a start script, and I want to point it at this app slash index.js. Now it doesn't, that file doesn't exist right now, but it will. But I'm just going to go ahead and finish this up. So this will be our complete package.json file. So I'm going to say node run app slash index.js, and then that. So what I can do is I can type in npm start, and it will run this thing right here, run that. And so that's it. That's basically our package.json file is all set up. We have our dependencies, Babel and Gulp stuff, and then these, basically this is Express stuff, this is Gulp stuff, and then this is Babel for transpiling. And that's it. The next thing I want to go over is the Gulp file. So what Gulp does is basically a JavaScript task runner, and so you can just tell it to run these tasks and like build things, clean things, move things around, delete things, whatever. It's basically a build tool for JavaScript. So as I mentioned earlier, there is a gulpfile.js file, and that's basically, you can write ES5 code, but because I used Babel in here, that allows me to write ES6 code instead of ES5. Okay, so let's go through this this Gulp file. Now I'm going to show you one way of doing this. There are 1,000 different ways of transpiling code from one file into another. This is just one particular way of doing it. So if you have another way, that's great. But this is just one way. Okay, so I have a whole bunch of node modules that I've downloaded, and those node modules are in here. So if you open up your node modules folder, you can see all these 10,000 node modules. They're the node modules you install directly, but B, they're also the dependencies. The node modules have dependencies on other node modules. So that's why, you say, well, I only downloaded 10 or so node modules. Why is there a million of them in here? It's because those have dependencies. Now, in older versions of NPM, they would actually put the dependencies inside of each individual node module, but they've changed that because Windows had a problem with directory structures being too deep. So they changed that, and now instead of making basically the directories going deep, they make them wide. So they try to make these all siblings of each other. Okay, so let's import some stuff. So if this were ES5, for example, I would say something like var gulp is equal to require gulp. That's what I would do. That's ES5 code. And so this is common.js, and so this is a node module, and it's going to find this thing gulp, and it's going to require it, and going to put this code inside this, or this variable will reference that code. So that's ES5, but because we're using Babel, let's change this to import, and we're going to say import gulp from gulp. So this does the same thing as the code I just wrote. This is the ES6 version, the other one is ES5. So let's go ahead and import in all the node modules that we're going to need for right now. That's the shell. There's rimraf. That's what you use to recursively delete a directory, or just delete delete a directory. Then there's run. This is run sequence. This allows you to run something, run a bunch of tasks either in series or parallel. There's import watch. Which basically will run some Gulp tasks when it notices that something changed. And then Gulp live server. So what this will do is this will basically restart Express. This runs Express and it will restart Express if something changes. So here we have Gulp, shell, rimraf, run, watch, and server. Okay. Once that's set up, we can create our paths. And so I'm going to use a new version, some new syntax in ES6. It's called const. It's for creating constants. I'm going to create a variable called paths. And that's going to be basically an object of paths. So I'm going to say, I'm going to create some JavaScript here. There are paths to my JavaScript, and this is an array. And I'm going to say go into source and then destination, and destination is /app. Okay, what this is these are two different paths. One is a JavaScript path, or basically this is an array of all the places where I have JavaScript that I want things done to it. And then this is the destination. So basically this is my source. Basically take all the JavaScript that's in my source folder and then put it in this app folder. Put it in this app folder. So this is the source, this is the destination. So anyway, there's these two paths. Okay, one of the first things I want to do is in Gulp, I want to create a Gulp task. And so how you create tasks is you say Gulp.task, and I'm going to create a task called default. And what's going to happen is when this Gulp task runs, it's called default. And how do you run a Gulp task? Well, you can just type in Gulp just by itself like this. And you see how it's trying to run the default task. So if you type in Gulp by itself, it will run default. But if you type in Gulp, I don't know, show, it'll run a show task, or Gulp talk. That doesn't make sense, but it'll run the talk task. So it's just Gulp in the name of the task. But if you don't give it a name, it uses default. So we're creating a default task, and what's going to happen is I want to create a function. Now normally you would write function like this, and then this function takes a callback. That's really cool and everything, but in ES6 you can just remove that and put this in, and then that's the same thing. So this is ES6 code. This is called the arrow function. So in this default task, what I want to do is I want it to run, and run is this run sequence thing up here. I want to run some tasks. I want to run the server task, then I want it to run the build task, then I want it to run the watch task, and then when it's done, call this callback, which is this one. So the callback gets passed in, and so when it's finished running all four of these things, this lets Gulp know that this task is finished when this callback gets run. So what I'm basically saying here is when I run Gulp, it will run the default by itself, automatically, and so then it will run this task, and this task. Okay, great. So, well, the first question is, what is this server task? Okay, so let's take a look at that. So to create that task, I would say Gulp task and call it server, which is this task right here. And this server, it's a function, and it takes a function. So it takes a string, and then this is a function right here. And there's no, so if you have one parameter, you can put it like this, but if there's no or many parameters, you have to use parentheses. Okay, so on this server task, I want to say, before this task, I'm going to create a variable called Express, like this. And then I'm going to say Express is equal to server, which is this thing, new, and I'm going to pass in paths.destination. So you're probably wondering what that's going to do. So this server thing is basically Express, and it says or allows you to run a server. So it says basically it's creating a new server, and paths.destination is /app. So basically my Express app is going to be in here. Now I didn't say /index. Well, by default it looks for index inside of a folder. So when I say server.new paths.destination, paths.destination points at this, but implicitly it looks for index.js. So it's basically newing up index.js or running index.js, and that is our Express app. So this is the Express app. Now it hasn't actually started yet. It just basically gets it ready to start. So that is the server task. The next task is the build task. So I'm going to create that task right here. Build. And build takes a callback. Like that. And when the build task runs, I want to run using the run sequence thing. I want it to run clean, the clean task, the flow task, the Babel task. You can call it the transpilation task if you want. The restart task, and then once it's finished with that, it's going to call the callback and let Gulp know that it's finished. So let's talk about with this build task. So when I run default, it runs the server, it gets the server ready, then it runs build. Build is this thing, and then it runs clean, flow, Babel, and then restart. And then once this thing is finished, it goes back up to here, and then it runs watch. That's how it works. Now, what this build task does, it's going to do a couple of things. First of all, it's going to clean. Clean mean what? Clean means delete this directory. Then it's going to run flow. Flow means it's going to do it's going to run static type analysis against my code to make sure like that all the types line up. And then Babel, after that finishes, then Babel's going to run, and Babel's going to transpile this code from the source directory into the app directory. And then once that's finished, then we're going to let Express know that the code has changed, and this will restart. Because obviously if your code changes, you need to restart Express. So this will restart Express. So okay, let's do this clean task. Okay. So I'm just going to copy this one and put that there. I'm going to call this clean, like that. Now what clean is going to delete this app directory, so I'm going to use rimraf, which deletes directories. So I'm going to say, hey rimraf, I want you to create or delete paths .destination. And then once you're finished, call this callback, and it lets me know that it's finished. So clean, we're letting rimraf know, delete the app folder, and then when it's finished, call this. So that's clean. The next one I want to run is flow. Create that flow task. So it's called flow. And then this one is a little bit different. So what flow is going to do is you say that, and then you say shell dot task, like that. And it's a function that takes an array. It doesn't have to, but we'll put it in here anyway. What this will do is this basically runs a shell command, or you could think of it as a Unix command, something you would run from the Unix prompt, like or the shell, like ls or pwd or whatever. So what I want it to do is I want it to run the program flow, and so basically it'll just run flow. It'll run flow for me. Now what happens is it will show you any errors that's happening in your static type analysis or static type checking, but it'll also like can crash your program while it's doing it. And so what I like to do is give it some options, and I like to say ignore errors. Is true. And what that'll do is it'll still do static type analysis, but if there's but it won't like cause Gulp to crash or whatever. So that's a good thing. That's what you want. I mean, I guess it depends on what you want, but I don't want Gulp to crash, so I'm just going to ignore these errors. So that's what flow. So this says just run the flow task and ignore errors. Okay, so there's flow, and then the next one is called Babel, and so this is going to be another shell command. Now there is a Babel Gulp runner, Gulp task, but I'm just going to do it manually. So for this one, I'm not going to ignore errors. For this one, I'm going to say I want you to run Babel, and then the source directory is source. So Babel, find all this ES6 or ES7 code that's in this folder, which is here, and then send it to this out directory, send it to app. So it says take all the code that's here and then put this ES6 code or ES7 code that's in here, and then change it to ES5 code and put that code here. And then Node will run this. Node will run whatever's inside of here. So that's Babel. We have our server. So we need to restart our server. That's another task as well too. So I'm going to put that right here. And so to restart the server, all you have to do is type in express.start.bind express, and then you have to run this. So that basically creates a function and then binds this object to it, and then it runs it. So this basically creates a function and then this runs it. So it's creating a function and then running it. And then this will restart Express. Once that's finished, then the last task we have to do is the watch task. So I'm going to copy this. So what watch is going to do is when files change, run something when files change. So I'm going to return watch. Now watch is this thing. So return watch. And what it's going to do is we're going to say, I want you to watch paths.js, which is this here. Watch that. And then when something happens, run this function. And what I want to do is when any file changes, I want you to run gulp.start, start the build task. Okay. So when any JavaScript file changes, I'm going to watch for any JavaScript file to change. When that happens, start this build task, which is basically this. So in recap, what's going to happen is when I just run gulp, it's going to start the server, run the build, do all the things in the build, and then watch. And then subsequently after that, so this will run one time, and then this will run every time after it. So anytime you make a change to the file, this will run. And so that's about it for this gulp file. Okay, now that we've written this gulp file, let's run it and see what happens. So if I just type in, back to my terminal, if I just type in gulp by itself, it will automatically try and run default, and default will run server, then build will do these things, and then once build's finished, it'll run watch. So basically all I have to type in is gulp and it will run everything. So if I type in gulp, well, it looks like I have an error. It says path is not defined in server. So we call this thing paths, so it's probably right here. Yes, this should be S, paths. Okay, so gulp ran, and you can see what happened when it ran. It ran default, then it ran server, then it ran build, clean, then flow, and then you can see here's all the flow errors. And then it ran Babel, transpiled, and then it ran restart on Express, and then build finish, then watch finish. So it looked pretty good. So a couple errors. First of all, Flow is having basically a little bit of a heart attack because of these files. And so here it says node modules Babel core, node modules Babel core, node modules Babel helper. So there's some Babel stuff and there's some Babylon stuff that Flow is checking and it's not liking. And this isn't code that we wrote, so I don't really care about it checking those things. So I'm just going to ignore. I'm going to go in that flow config file and I'm going to ignore these. Now, as far as this is concerned, basically Express is trying to run, and Express is looking for a file under project app. Remember, that's where the transpiled code went. But there is no index. There's no code in here. So when the server starts up, there is no code. So that's why it's not running. So this is no big deal. But let's finish. Let's get these errors to go away. So to do that, we're going to go to this flow config file, and under ignore, we're going to ignore these files here that's freaking out on. So how you do that is you say .star / node modules / Babel. We'll just ignore everything that's Babel, and then we're going to ignore node modules Babylon / .star. So anything that's Babel, anything that's Babylon, and I also don't want it to run, or I don't want to do any static type checking on anything in my app folder, just my source folder. So I'm gonna say star / app. So ignore those things. Okay. So if we Control C out of here, run gulp again, and that looks much better, right? So what's happening is Flow is starting back up, and it's initializing and parsing, it's figuring things out. Once this thing finishes, hopefully not too much longer, it will actually do the analysis. Yeah. So, okay. So it says, so basically this is the index.js is missing. So if I just come back here, and I don't know, I say inside source, I create a new file, call it index.js. There it is, and you saw that app file got deleted, and then there's index.js in there. So you see that, and then this thing restarted. So let's run this one more time. Yeah, see that? So it ran it. It said there were no errors. Obviously, there's no errors, but because there's no code in there. And then is Babel. It transpiled source index to app index, and now it's listening, watching for me to make a change. So all this looks pretty good. This is a good place to do a commit. We probably should have committed before. Okay. So if I come back in here now, those files, those colors in Atom, when you have changes that need to be made, these files change colors. Okay, there's that. Okay, That's it as far as the build is concerned. Now what we're going to do next is set it up so we're going to set up Express using ES6 and ES7. Okay, on to the fun part. So now that we've installed all the tools, we're actually ready to start writing ES6 code using Express. Okay, so let's start. So what I have right here is this is my index.js file, and this is where I'm going to write my Express code. Now, what I can do is I can kind of put this to the side and put this to the side, and so this is control slash backslash hides that. Now, before we get started, if you go to Edit Preferences, let me just make this a little bit bigger. You need, if you're gonna you can have the static type checking that Flow does show up actually in your UI. Now it can and it will show up here, but you can also have it show up in your UI by, if you go to settings and then packages or install, and it's called linter flow, and this is it, and I already have it installed. But if you install it, this allows you to show errors in your text editor, and you don't necessarily have to look in your terminal window. So that's what I have installed, linter flow. Okay. Just an FYI, if you're curious about some of the packages I have installed in here, one, I have file icons. That's what makes these icons on the side. If you're wondering where that came from this file icons thing. There's a color picker one. Pigments is really cool. If you're doing React, there's a React one. Maybe I'll do a video on packages for Atom. But anyway, but right now, the only one you really need, file icons is cool, but the main one that we're talking about is called linter flow, and that's this guy right here. So just make sure he's installed. Okay. Once he's installed, then you're ready to start writing some code. Now, when you have a file that you want the Flow static analysis checker to actually check, you have to give it a command by saying @flow, like that. That little comment, that's a comment to Flow, letting it know that you want to check this. So, as an example, if I just type in some garbage and hit save, you can see down here there's a warning, and even there's a warning here. See, there's a flow warning. It says identifier cannot resolve name. So you can see that Flow is actually doing something because it's showing you this. Now, also over here, I should be typing in Gulp, like this, like Gulp startup. And so here's Gulp, and he says, you can see Flow is running here too. It's basically the same type of error. So if I remove this thing, like that, hit that, you can see as soon as I hit save that this thing restarted, and now that looks good. Okay, so let's start. So the first thing I want to do is I want to bring in import Express in. So I'm going to say import Express from Express. Now this is ES6 code. Now I also want to import body parser from body parser. That allows you to parse the body of an HTTP request. And then I want to import Multer, which allows you to send files. And then Morgan. That allows you to show debugging information for HTTP requests. So that looks pretty good. So if I hit save, and I can watch Gulp run, watch it restart, and see there's no errors. Also, there's no errors here. So I know, it looks decent so far. So I'm going to create, this is a ES6 thing, const. I'm going to create a variable called app, or a constant called app, and it's my Express app. So I'm this is my Express app here, and then I'm going to create another variable called upload, or constant called upload. That's from Multer. So that's for, like I said, for file uploads. This is your Express app. So once you have this, you're ready to go. Now, I want Express to serve up static content, maybe like HTML files or JavaScript files or CSS files, and I want it to store those. Let me just bring this up back. I want it to serve those up from the public folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say app.use express.static and dir name plus slash dot dot slash public. So what this says, this tells Express to look in the public directory right here for any static content. Now I want to say app.use Morgan dev. This tells Morgan, which is a logger, to log in dev mode. There's many types of modes. This is just one type. Then I want to use the body parser. One parses Json. And another one parses URL encoded body. Okay. Once that's a little bit of setup, now once that's ready, we're actually ready to start the server. So I'm going to say app.listen. Let's say we want to listen on port 3000. And then once that's finished, call this function right here. It's a ES6 arrow function. Once that's done, we'll say console.log. I don't know, server is listening. Something like that. So I've got no errors here, no errors here. Let's see if it's running. So it says right here, server is listening. Server is listening. Okay, so we know the server's up, it's listening. Let's create a public file here. Let's go new file index.html. And so we'll do like an h1. Welcome to ES2015 plus, because we're going to use ES6 and ES7. So if I save that, and so theoretically I should be able to open up my browser to localhost 3000, and there it is. So I pulled it in. So you can see that that request actually worked. See, and you can see that Git request show up down here. So that's one way. Let's make a simple, so it's obviously working. Let's do this afterwards. Maybe I'll put some routes right here. Sample routes. Let's do a hello world. So I'll do app.get to /hello. And it's a function that takes a request and a response. And then we'll do response dot send. We'll send world out. Okay. So this should still work. And now if I type in /hello world, great. Now let's do a slightly dynamic one. Let's say let's say we want to add two numbers. So we'll say add x, y, and then let's say let. These come in as strings. So I'm going to say const x is equal to rec.params.x times 1. That will turn that to a number. And then we'll grab the y value as well too. And that's y. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to say res for response.send. And we're going to send something out. Let's send out the sum. And we're going to say the sum is, well, it's the sum of x and y. And that should be that. And let's check that out. So that's add. There's no errors here, so that's always good. So if I say /hello, that should work. And then /sum 3 and 5. And, oh, I called it add. Yeah, called it add. 3 and 5, and the sum is 8. So that worked. So that looks pretty good. Okay, so that's it. So this is an ES6 app because we have import, const. I didn't use the word let in here that I see, but we have arrow functions. So this little tutorial wasn't necessarily about ES6. It was basically about how to set up Babel and Flow with Express. And so yeah, that's all set up. I'll have links on here to this code to a GitHub repo that I have, plus links to other sites like Atom or NPM. So check out the links below. All right, thanks. Bye.